Steineger'i Amerika mərkəzində salamlayırıq. Deməli, cənab Steineger 4 dəfə senata seçilmişdi və Kanzas ştatının senatorudur. Hal-hazırda Bakıda ABŞ səfirliyinin dəvəti ilə səfər edir, dəvəti ilə səfərdədir. Və mən istərdim ki, o öz təcrübəsi barəsində danışsın, ABŞ dövləti barədə biraz daha çox hakimiyyəti barədə sizə məlumat versin və 20-25 dəqiqə danışandan sonra artıq sizin suallarınızı qəbul edə bilər. Buyurun.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay in the back row? I don't use a microphone. Yeah. Well, thank you for the opportunity to come speak to you today. My name is Chris Steineger. I am was a state senator in Kansas City. Kansas, you know the map of the U.S. Kansas is just directly in the center of the U.S. and I live in Kansas City. It's a nice town, about 1,300,000 people. It's very economically diverse with a really good economy in my town. And my family has been there, I think, 4 generations living in Kansas City. So I'm here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about American government. And normally this class, if I were given a class lecture, it would take a semester, 3 months to really explain the American Constitution and our structure of government. Today, we only have about an hour. So we're taking 3 months of lecture and making it into about a 1-hour lecture. So we're going to go really quick. And at the end of it, I think I'm speaking for about 30 minutes, okay? And then the second half is for you to ask questions. So be thinking of questions, ask any question you like. I'm a politician. I'm accustomed to having many questions, easy questions or tough questions. That's fine, but the second half of this is for you. I think that the best way to learn, not just American government, but to learn any subject is questions and answers. You can always hear lectures, you can read books, you can see a video, but the best thing to do is to ask questions. That's how we all learn. So American government, it really starts with our American Constitution. And probably here in the American Center you have a copy of the American Constitution someplace. It's a rather simple document. Every country has a constitution. We do, Azerbaijan does, Russia has a constitution, Germany has a constitution, Japan has a constitution. Every country has a constitution. And you know, it's in writing, in words, in laws, the basic laws of that country, of Azerbaijan, of America, of Germany. That's what a constitution is. So our American Constitution was written about 1776, in the year 1776. Before that time, you know, American history, before 1776, we were a colony of the English. You know, the British or English Empire, they had England, but they had colonies all over the world. And we were one of them. Until 1776, we had we call the American Revolution. And the people at that time, they were tired of being bossed around and having, England was across the Atlantic Ocean, a long distance. Today you can fly there in 6 hours on a plane, but in that time it took 6 weeks on a small sailing boat. So the people in the land at that time did not want to be ruled by England, they wanted a separate country. Well, so they declared themselves to be independent. There was a war fought, and ultimately the English lost the war and the Americans won. And they wrote a constitution in 1776, and that gives the basic laws of our country. And the most important thing you need to understand about this, the most important values that Americans have from our Constitution, that every one of us knows and feels today, is freedom and opportunity. Freedom and opportunity. Our Constitution, when they wrote it, they tried to allow, the guys that wrote the Constitution, they tried to allow as much freedom for the individual person, as much freedom as possible to you, and not so much power for the government. Freedom, if you think about it in the abstract, freedom is a form of power. It is a form of power. The question is, who controls it? Do you control your freedom, or does the government control it? You should control your freedom. You should control your opportunity. and this is a basic philosophical concept that is in our Constitution and is also in the mind of every American today. I should control my own destiny. I should control myself, where I want to go, who I want to hang out with. That the individual American citizen should control your own freedom. And so, so what's important, I can't read this, it's Azerbaijan, but you can read it for me. Very interesting. So what's, yeah, I know. What's important is, any constitution is laws. They're written on paper. They're designed by people, men and women. They're put on writing on paper. That's a constitution. An important concept about the American Constitution, it's not just the words that are written, it's also what is not written. This is a form of freedom. Laws are rules and regulations that we must live by. When there is no law, then I call that a form of freedom. The American Constitution is actually a rather small document. There's not many pages. I think it's only about 10 or 12 pages. Depends on how big the paper is. But it's not such a big constitution. And the idea is the guys that wrote this constitution, they did not want many limits on freedom. They did not want many laws. They were opposed to more laws that would tell you what to do. Instead, they prefer that you decide what you want to do. So these concepts of freedom and opportunity, I know if you come to the American Center and you study America, you've heard this all before. Freedom, 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 freedom. Well, it's true, and this is why. It's because the original American colonists, they were tired, sick and tired of being ruled by England, a faraway king, a faraway boss. They were sick and tired of that. They wanted to rule themselves. And they wrote this Constitution in a way that it would try to do their best to guarantee we would never have a king, and we would never have a dictator, and we would never have a government or ruling class that had too much power. The power is with the people, the individuals. Okay? So a bit about the history of it. The Constitution was written by a small group of white men. There were no women involved. There were no poor white men. These were all well-educated, wealthy, successful white men. About 25 of them. And they met in Philadelphia, the city of Philadelphia, and wrote this. They discussed these ideas. Some of the guys were more influential. Some of the guys were more quiet. But together they discussed what should we write in this Constitution? What should be included and what should not be included? And I am still amazed today, 250 years later, how well or how good this document, this Constitution is. These guys were writing long before the internet, long before automobiles, long before electricity or bottled water or anything. They were just, it was a long time, 1776, if you think about that, in human development. And yet, 250 years later today, this Constitution still works quite well. It's been changed, it's been modified, it's been improved, but the basic document is pretty darn good. So, but it's not perfect. Freedom in the U.S., as much as we talk about it, as much as we go around the world telling everyone how great freedom is, it is not perfect. It's not perfect today, and it has not been perfect throughout the life of our country. Let me give you some examples. The right to vote. We vote for our politicians. Every American has the right to vote. Many of them choose not to vote, but you have the right to vote. And so what it started out as in 1776, only people that could vote were wealthy white men. You had to be white, man, and own property. If you did not own a house or did not own land, you couldn't vote. So you had to be a white, and men that were not white could not vote either. In fact, in our early days of our country, there was slavery, especially in the southern states. Black people were owned as property. They owned like a car, like you own a cell phone. So it was not free for them. So there is our history is not perfect by any means, but it's getting better and better and better as the years go by. So initially, 1776, only wealthy white guys could vote. Within about 15 or 20 years, all white men were allowed to vote. But then it went for quite a long time before any more freedom for anybody. This is the American Civil War, 1860 to 1865. America had a civil war between the northern states and the southern states. The issue primarily was about slavery. The southern states owned slaves. They believed it was their state's right to have slaves. The northern states, the northern people did not like this idea. They thought it was immoral, that it was against religion. And so a war was fought about slavery, and the northern states won, the southern states lost. Slavery was abolished, and the slaves were given the rights to be a citizen. So a little more freedom and a little more equality, but still not great. For many, many, many years, black people were, even though they were a citizen and had the right to vote, there were many things that were done to kind of restrict their voting. And this has taken almost another 80 years to really end the discrimination, at least on voting, and really trying to make everybody equal. But there was one group that was left out to the very end. One group that was not allowed to vote, and that's the women. And I will say to you, I'm embarrassed as an American that it took us from 1776 until 1920 before women had the right to vote in the United States. Wealthy white guys, poor black guys, and finally the women in 1920. I think Azerbaijan, when did the women first vote?
1918.
1918, 2 years before we did. So I tell you this as a story because it is, freedom is not perfect. It's not perfect for us, it's not perfect. I think freedom is just a concept. Maybe it's a goal for the world that everyone should be free. There's no country, there's no one place where freedom is absolutely perfect. In America, we're trying to make it perfect, and we keep working and working and working. It's taken us 250 years to get this far, but bit by bit, we're making it more and more freedom for more and more people in our country. Today, women have the right to vote for a long time. Women have the right to be president if they want to. Hillary Clinton is going to try and be president. We don't know if that will happen. But, in a country where black men were once owned as slaves, in that same country, 120 years later, a black man became the president. And he was elected twice. So that was a huge step for, not just freedom for America, not just the advancement of black people in America, but for the world, honestly. There was no other major, big nation in the world that had a black man as a president until we did it. So there were black presidents in black Africa, but not anywhere in Europe or anywhere in, frankly, the white man's world, or in Asia. So America is the first country to actually openly, freely elect a black man as president. So I believe that was another huge step in our country's evolution of the idea of freedom and equality for people, okay? Well, let's talk about the structure of government. Our Constitution, in addition to granting us freedom, a lot of freedom and opportunity, it also created a government structure. We have 3 levels of government. Federal in Washington, our national government in Washington, we call it federal, maybe you call it national. Then we have 50 state governments. California, Texas, Colorado, Kansas, where I'm from, Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania. These are all the 50 states. Each of the 50 states has its own government that actually, by Constitution, looks very similar to the one in Washington. And then at the bottom, we have about 100,000 what we call local units of government. This would be city governments and public school districts, and also counties. So like the city of Chicago, city of Dallas, city of Atlanta. Each of these is a local city government. The people in that town elect the mayor, they elect the city council. We also have a local school district to operate and manage the public schools in that area. And they also have elected board of directors, elected by the people that live within that school district area, okay? So 3 levels, federal, state, and local. What's the big differences? Well, the biggest difference is which government controls or manages policies and issues. And I'm going to simplify that. We're trying to do this in 30 minutes. But The federal government is primarily responsible for every issue or problem outside of our borders. So this would be any type of foreign relations, foreign trade, negotiating trade treaties, having treaties or relationships between the U.S. and Azerbaijan or between the U.S. and Germany, issues of border control, controlling the border, issues of control of the U.S. military, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force are all controlled by the national government in Washington, okay? But then there's domestic issues or domestic policy. This would be many, many, many things. Construction of highways, funding of schools, funding of universities, health care, health insurance, food safety to make sure the food is good, water safety to make sure the water is clean, building of parks for families. All of these things that take place inside the U.S. border are considered domestic policy. And those issues are primarily controlled by the states and the local government. Washington has some oversight, and they give us some money, and they have a little bit of policy on domestic issues. But primarily, the big difference with the American model versus Germany or France or Azerbaijan is we're more of a bottom-up government. Most of the domestic policy is controlled by the bottom layer and the middle layer. The federal government has some control and management over domestic, but not nearly as much as the states and locals. In Germany, for example, Germany has a central government in Berlin. They also have 16 states. But their state governments are a bit weak. Yeah, they control some of the domestic issues, but in Germany, the national government is relatively stronger and the states are relatively weak. In America, the national government is strong, but on domestic issues, domestic policy issues, the states are almost equal. A little bit less, but almost equal. And this is maybe a subtle difference, but it's actually a very, very big difference about how America is managed as opposed to Germany or China or many other places in the world, okay? And it's a difference or a subtle nuance or difference that I believe most people in other countries, they don't quite understand that. I get many questions that when I give these speeches that people don't quite understand that when the U.S., the states are really in charge, and the states and the local governments, they're in charge of the police, the fire department, city parks, school funding, university funding. Most of these things, highway construction, food safety, water safety, most of these issues are managed and controlled, and even the funding comes from the local and state government, okay? I think in Azerbaijan, it's a very small country. It's a lot easier. If you're in a small country, Azerbaijan, Ireland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, if you're in a small country, you don't need so much. You can manage things from the national level. But America's a big place. It's a big piece of land. And it cannot be managed all from Washington. It's just too big. So in 1776, these guys that wrote the Constitution, they were very smart. They were very intelligent. Somehow, I guess they believed that America would someday be a large country. And so they designed a government system with federal, state, and local. And it works quite well for us. Let me talk a little bit about how government and business work together, or how they don't work together. So in the U.S., as part of our freedom, we also have the freedom to start a business. You know, start your own business, become a successful entrepreneur, be a technology entrepreneur, or a movie star. You can also be a famous entertainer. You know, it doesn't take a whole lot because you have the freedom to do what you want to do. You know, I give examples. The guys that invented the iPhone or Apple computer was Stephen Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Anybody know those names, Steve Jobs or Steve Wozniak? They were the founders of Apple Computer. These two guys, they started in 1977. They were not rich. They were not the son or daughter or somebody famous. They were just two guys, but they were good with technology. They were good with mathematics and technology. And they had the idea of the PC, personal computer, which for your generation is like old stuff. But for my generation, when the PC was invented, it was just like, this is revolution. For you guys, it's the mobile phone. This is like a mini PC, or better. But these two guys started this computer company from a garage. They had an idea. They didn't even have much money, but they had an idea. that we can make a PC. It'll be fast and simple, and people will buy, you know, a couple thousand of these things. You know, the PC revolution around the world, millions of PCs, personal computers, have been made and sold. The new ones are so much better than the old ones. But these two guys started because they had the freedom to start a company. You know, it's very easy to start a company. You really, the most important thing you need is an idea. It's not that you need permission. It's that you have an idea that you want to make into a company, and you have the willpower and the work. You'll work and try to make your company grow. So there are many, many examples, though. You look at pop music or pop culture. Madonna. I realize Madonna is maybe more from my generation, but you know, she was a poor girl from New York City in the 1970s. But she had a sense of style and how to dress, and she had a good voice, and you know, she started singing in local clubs and then bigger clubs, and you know, she's a worldwide pop star. She started out as a poor girl in a poor neighborhood in New York City. There's a new film out, The Fast and the Furious. You guys know this about like racing cars? Vin Diesel, you know, he's the Vin Diesel guy. This dude, I'm telling you, 10 years ago, he was nobody. He is not from any famous family. He had no money. He was the bouncer, doorman at a nightclub. You can imagine he's like this. He was working at a nightclub in Los Angeles to guard, you know, protect the door, you know, because he's. And but he had this, he's got charisma, he's got style, and someone found this guy, and now he's like $40 million wealthy. But he was a barman 10 years ago. So, you know, in the U.S. you have all this freedom. You can be almost anything you want to be. Barack Obama. You know, 30 years ago, when he was a boy, his father ran away. He was raised by a single mother household. In the U.S., that's really, really difficult to grow up in what we call single mom household. Honestly, most people, they struggle to ever get beyond that. Somehow this guy became, you know, first he became state senator like me in Illinois, then he became U.S. senator in Washington, and then president. He was the product of a single mother household, poor, no connections, no money, but he became president. So the American model, it's not just the American model, but any model that emphasizes freedom and empowerment and self-opportunity for the individual, any country that has that, anybody can make it. I mean, if you work hard, a lot of people fail. They work hard, they have a great idea, but they fail. But, you know, it's a model or system. I call it a system, or, you know, blueprint or motherboard if you're into computers. It's a system that allows the maximum number of people to be as much as you want to be. And I think that's the model of keeping government small and keeping regulations and limits, laws limiting you, keeping those small, and allowing the individual to have the most amount of freedom you can be. And then having a system where you're encouraged to be as much as you can. We say be all you want to be who you want to be. And a lot of Americans, you know, honestly, they don't try very hard. They're satisfied with maybe less. But, you know, there are quite a few people that are very successful in business, in sports, in entertainment, in technology, all these things. It's because they have the freedom to try and be everything they want to be, to pursue their dreams, as we say. Have a dream, have an idea, and work for it. So this I think is probably the single, I know you've heard about freedom and opportunity probably by hearing some of these speeches, but I hope that by having a real American, and I guess I'm a senator too, or was, that maybe I help explain it to you in a way that's a very, very powerful concept, very philosophy that every one of us in the U.S. believes. Some of us believe it more, some of us believe it less, but most of us believe in freedom and opportunity, and that if you have good ideas and if you work hard, you can realize and make these ideas become true. So, so for a quick review, I've told you a little bit about the history of our Constitution, who wrote the Constitution and what were they thinking. I've told you a little bit that it's about freedom in our country. That it's not always been great, it's not always been good for everyone, but year by year, decade by decade, generation by generation, we're making it better and better, and it is getting better. And although it's still not perfect, And I've told you a little bit about, you know, how the business world works, that it's the same thing. You can build any business you want. You can start with two guys like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. You can start with no money and build a major company. And so I think we should be pretty close to having some of your questions. How's our time? Who's my timekeeper? All right. Well, I think it would be good if I take a few questions from the audience then. And this, I think, is always the best way to learn. So we talked about the structure of government, federal, state, and local. I told you that the federal government primarily is responsible for everything outside of the borders of the country. The states are involved primarily managing domestic affairs, although the federal government does have some control over domestic affairs, but we generally try and, you know, keep that limited. One other thing I forgot to mention, the three, very fundamental in the Constitution, the three-way balance of power. The federal government and the 50 states, we have what's called three-way balance of power. We have the president, or executive branch of government, that's President Obama. We have the legislative branch of government, that's the United States Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives, also known as Congress. And we have the judicial branch, judiciary, the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington. This is meant to be a three-way balance, okay? The guys that wrote the Constitution had lived under the British English king, King George. He was a dictator. Most kings can be nice guys, but they can also be mean guys. Dictators can be nice guys, they can also be bad guys. And these guys that wrote our Constitution, they did not want a strong president because they thought the president could become a dictator. So they create what we call checks and balances. It's a balance thing. It's a three-way balance between judicial branch, executive branch, and legislative branch. No one group, no single group can get too much power because the other two branches balance it out. That's in theory how it works. It's not always perfect, but over time, over the many, many years, over 250 years, the balance has worked pretty well. Our 50 state governments also have the same model. They have a three-way balance. Instead of president, we say governor. You're a governor of a state. You're president of America, but you're governor in the state. The state also has a state senate and state House of Representatives. I was state senator in Kansas, and we have a state Supreme Court. Okay, so it looks just the same for the 50 states as it does at the national level. Each of the 50 states also has a constitution for managing things within their state. Okay, but the state constitution cannot go beyond the national one. The national government is still in charge. The national constitution is still in overall command of everything. But each of the 50 states has their own state constitution as well. So with that, I think it's now time for your question. We've talked about the structure of government, federal, state, and local, the three-way balance of power. We talked about the evolution of equality, the evolution of voting rights, and evolution of freedom in the country. So I would rather have an entire semester with you guys, or at least a week, or a couple of hours, but I don't have that. I have 1 hour. So there you are. It is now your turn to ask as many questions as we can. I will stay as long as I can until they drag me out of here. So, who has the first question? Man or woman? Woman, please. Speak up loud.
Okay, I have a question, but it's not related exactly to your speech.
Okay.
The topic is what I'm interested in, the youth policy, and what problem stands before youth development in America or exactly in Kansas State?
What policies about youth development?
And, yeah, what problems?
Yeah, the question is about youth development in the U.S. and even in Kansas. So are you asking about, are there problems or policies or both? Or?
Which problems stands before youth development, and what are the future plans of state or America
Okay.
for development?
Okay. Well, once again, the issue about youth development, each of the 50 states, the states and the city government, the states and local governments are more in charge of managing this issue, not so much the federal government. Although there are many issues of youth development or problems with young people. They're across the nation, but nonetheless, it is left mostly to the individual states and local governments to manage the issue. It's not always a problem. Sometimes it's a benefit. Oh, I would guess probably the number one thing is just funding of education. Because every young person is going to public schools and maybe hopefully university. So the number one thing is to fund our schools and our universities in a way that is good. Also seen as a youth, when we think of youth in America, you guys are more like young adults. Your mother and father probably think you're a youth, but you guys are more like young adults. In America, when we think of youth, we typically think of smaller, younger children, maybe under the age of 12 or 13 or something like that. In America, legally, at 18 years of age, you're considered adult. Well, that varies a little bit, but mostly it's age 18. So I guess you could say someone who's 16 years old is a youth, but in the American psyche, we would say small children are youth. If you're 16, you're a teenager, you're almost grown up. And once you're 18, you're fully grown up. So the management of this issue, when there's a problem or opportunity, is by the state and local governments primarily. But I think the most important things these days is to make sure that it's not just that you fund the schools, but young people have to have desire to learn. And I think I guess that maybe is one of the biggest problems in the U.S. right now for younger people. Is there obviously you guys came, how many of you are paid to come to this lecture today? Nobody got paid money to come here? You came here because you desired to. Very powerful concept. You have desire to learn. That's a very powerful thing. Much more powerful than you think. The desire to learn. You could have gone home and took a nap. You could have gone home and played video games. You could have gone and had a coffee. But you had desire to come here and listen to me. What worries me sometimes in my country, in the U.S., there are many young, the majority are like you. They want to learn. But some want to learn more, and unfortunately, we have some kids, they don't want to learn anything. They don't care about anything. All they want to do is sit on the sofa and watch TV. And all they're learning is just, there's some smart things on television. There's a lot of stupid stuff on television. And that, I think, to me, that's one of the biggest problems is we have plenty of young people that are super talented, super intelligent people. But we also have, and some that are in the middle, but we have some that just don't care at all. And, my worry is, someday these people are going to be young adults and then in their 20s and 30s and 40s, and they're not very smart because they didn't value learning and gaining knowledge. That's, to me, is maybe I guess you could call that a youth problem. I think it's a national problem. That we have plenty of really smart people with a lot of motivation, but we have too many that just don't care. Who has the next question? Yes, please.
Directly connected with the United States. Yes. Once I read that Muslims don't serve in the army.
Not true. No, any Muslim can join. If you're American, you have to be American. The question is, are Muslims banned from joining the military? No. Not many Muslims join the military, but it's encouraged just like anybody else. The Muslim population in the U.S. is still rather small, but there's no ban or limit on joining the military. I've never had that question before, so I'm not sure. Where do you read this at?
Only one Azerbaijan some many years ago.
That must be a long time ago. There are not many Muslims in the military, but there are some. Yep.
That's very good.
Yep.
I appreciate.
Question.
I would like to know how many universities have in Kansas State, as well as secondly, I want to know what is the best university in
Okay. His question is how many universities in my state of Kansas? Well, the U.S. has thousands of universities. Some are very well known, like Harvard and Yale. Some universities are not known at all. I don't know all the universities we have, but Harvard and Yale, the top, they're really good, but there are a lot of other universities that are 99% as good as Harvard or Yale. The cost is much less money, and you can get a great education. At most universities, you can get a great education. And once again, it really with the most important thing is not the university, it's what's your own mind. If you want to learn, you can learn anywhere. You don't even need a university. I mean, my God, you're the internet generation. With the internet, you can learn anything without even going to university, if you want to, if you have the willpower. So, your question, in my state, Kansas, we have 6 big, we call 4-year colleges. Many times in the U.S. we say college. University and college generally mean the same thing. There's some small differences, but in the U.S. we often just say college.
What's the difference?
Next question. Actually, she's the next question, and I'll come back. So in my state, we have 6 big, what I call 4-year university. You spend 4 years, you get your degree. We have 18 2-year colleges. I guess the difference is colleges can often be just a 2-year college. You get like a smaller degree. To be a university, you must offer 4-year degrees. We have many of these smaller colleges. They're smaller and they're more in the city, and often are for people going part-time, attending part-time, also having a job. The big 4-year universities, normally you're going full-time for 4 years. So my state has 6 4-year colleges that are subsidized by state government. In America, normally the government gives a lot of the money to the university, but also the family must pay. The family and the student also must pay some money. So we have, in Kansas, Kansas is a relatively small, it's a large state. Kansas, Azerbaijan is this big. Kansas is almost 4 or 5 times the land size, but we only have less than 3 million people. I think Baku has more people than all of Kansas. But Kansas is big, most of it's very rural. But we have 6 4-year colleges. We have about 18 2-year colleges that are subsidized, that are paid for by the government. And then we have about 18 or 20 small private colleges. Often they're like Catholic, or there's just some small private colleges. Not many students attending those. The big 4-year colleges, probably half the students we have are at 6 places. And the best ones are the ones I attended. I have undergraduate degree business management from Kansas State University. I have master's degree in public administration from University of Kansas. Those are the 2 best ones. So, this lady, you had a question a long time ago.
For example, you have to be 21 years old in order to rent a car or to go to club, and others at 18, or you can carry it with your guns in some of the states, but why do they are?
Yeah, she has a very good question. She asked, why do some cities and states allow 18-year-olds to go to a club or drive a car, and in another state it's banned? You must be 21, or owning guns. This is the American model. It's just, America is a very large country, and it's actually quite diverse economically. It's quite diverse even by the people. In some areas, they're a little more, like the rural areas, like Montana or Idaho, Colorado. Those people, they're very rural states. They have a lot of mountains. They have a big tradition of hunting, so they're much more a lot more freedom about owning guns in some of the rural states. If you go to a very urban area like New York City, New York City is a big city, 15 million people. Well, they have many restrictions on guns or smoking. Smoking is another issue. Each state and each city regulates smoking. There's basically nationwide indoor smoking in public buildings is not allowed. But what you smoke in your own private home, you can smoke as many cigarettes as you want. But different states and different cities have different age, sometimes there are age restrictions to buy cigarettes. And the trend has been towards making it, you must be older to buy cigarettes. It used to be there was, I mean, when I was a little boy, there was no limit. A child could walk in and buy a package of cigarettes. Now, I would guess most of the, I don't know, but I would guess most of the states probably have some age minimum for buying tobacco. Alcohol would be another one that is restricted by age. Some states you must be 21 to buy alcohol, some states just 18. Maybe a few states allow alcohol purchases at 16, I'm not sure. But yeah, again, America's a big, we can't, it's just too big of a country to have so many laws that are all the same. You know, we need to allow some local people to have differences to their way of life. You know, some states are more religious, some cities are much more strongly Christian. So they typically have states that are restricting alcohol and restricting, you know, maybe something to do with marriage. Other places like New York City are very liberal, so they have fewer restrictions on going to nightclubs or things like this. Each community is a little bit, some are more liberal, some are more conservative. So this is our system that the local governments make some of these decisions. However, everywhere in all 50 states, murder is against the law. But in some states, murder, we have death penalty. Some states, we don't have death penalty. It's almost never used in the U.S. In many states, we have the death penalty, but they almost never use it. But this is another example. And even if they have the death penalty, well, what crime must you do to be considered for death? And each state makes a little bit slightly different. Normally, it's got to be really, really bad. You take a machine gun and kill a bunch of people, or you kidnap somebody and cut off their head, or do something really bad to get the death sentence. It's not given out very often. But each state makes their own determination because it's domestic policy. And remember, in America, they created a system, a national government that primarily manages outside of our borders, but the states themselves and the locals manage issues within the borders. So this is why. Question? Yes?
You said that everyone has equal rights in America. And from the news, we see that the black men are killed by American police. And I think that it's a kind of discrimination. What do you think about this topic as an American citizen?
Okay. Yeah. The question is about black men, young black men being shot by the police. Is this discrimination? It's a very big issue in the U.S. right now, being talked about quite a bit. I don't think American policemen are very well trained, police ladies, all the police women. These people are very well trained. They have much training, especially about using their gun. And these guys, they're trained psychologically. You know, this is a gun, this is the holster. You put the gun in. They have a lot of psychological training about do not take the gun out of your holster. You know, the guy, you can do this, don't take out your, he's the policeman and I'm the bad guy. You know, I can do that, don't take out your gun. If I actually kick, then you're supposed to step back. You know, they're all trained to avoid use of what we call, let me finish. It's a long answer. I typically give long answers. The policemen are trained to avoid using lethal force at all, if possible. So if they do pull their gun and fire one bullet, let alone 10 or 15 bullets, let alone if they actually shoot somebody, if they take out their gun and shoot one bullet, every police department, he's not fired, he's not punished, but for a day or two we take you are, you're not put out on patrol, you kind of stay home for a day or two. We have an internal group that looks at the report and they ask, why did you take out your gun? Did you step back? Did you do all these things? So why did you take out the gun? Okay? Why did you shoot? Did you see if anybody's, did you shoot at someone? Did you look to see if there's other people behind this guy? If a policeman fires one bullet, the police department has what they call internal investigation. It's not punishment. It's not punishment against the cop. They just want to find out, why did you shoot the gun? Because these police departments, they all know a bullet kills people. It's lethal. So there is a lot of checks and balances. Nonetheless, there are young black men that get shot. It is true in the U.S. that of people that are in prison, in the U.S. we have something like 1 million people that are in prison. The majority are young black men, or young minority. We also say minority, like Mexican maybe. The majority are black or Hispanic men and young, under the age of 30. And it is in proportion, of the total U.S. population, 310 million people, black men are this some percentage, but in the prison population, they're a much larger percentage than they are. Does that make sense? Statistically, black men, a much larger percentage of them is in prison or jail than white men or white women, and same, more men are in jail than of all women of any color. So it is true, but this is where the crime is happening. The crime doesn't happen some crime happens in white neighborhoods, but a lot of crime happens in the black neighborhoods. So it is more, there's a lot more drug dealing, a lot more, honestly, it's cold, it's sad. Cold truth is, of gun death in the United States, something like 90% of it. I know people all the stuff about guns in the U.S. and gun death. 90% of it is young black or Hispanic men killing another young black or Mexican man. It's not white on black. It's not white cop shooting cop. About 90% of gun death is young black men killing other young black men. 2 reasons: drug deals. I sold you some drugs. You didn't pay me. Bam. What's the other reason? Women. Hey, you're messing around with my woman. That's my girlfriend. Bam. And that's how it happens. It's cold, it's sad, but it's the truth. It's young. Most gun death is young minority men killing other young minority men, and often it's something to do with, or it's either drugs, girls, or just young guys. Oh, you want to fight? Oh, fight. Oh, we'll fight. Bam, bam. Ooh, all right, I'm gonna shoot you then. One guy's getting beat up harder, so he takes out his gun. And that's or you 2 guys beat me up. So I run home and I get the gun and I come back looking for it. I'm going to get these guys. I'm going to find them. There they are. Bam, bam. That kind of stuff happens. It's sad, but it's the truth. With regards to cops shooting black men, it does happen. I think there are these videos. You can see them on the news. You can see on YouTube videos of the police, 5 cops beating up some guy. You see like maybe 10 seconds or 30 seconds of video. What you don't see is what happened 3 minutes before that or 10 minutes before that. And a lot of times these guys that are getting beat by the cops did something really bad. They stole a car. I steal her car. As I'm driving really fast, I crash into all these 3 cars. She gets hurt. I keep on driving with her stolen car, and then I crash into a tree. The cops are chasing me. Adrenaline. Like no different than playing football. Your heart is pumping. Adrenaline. And these, and they saw, he stole the car, stole her car, smashed their cars. These 2 ladies badly hurt, and then he crashes the car and he jumps out and he keeps running. He runs away. The cops chase him down. They get fired up, and they, 5 cops beat him up. It happens. I'm not saying it's right, but it happens.
I understand you, but sometimes police are rude, and they can arrest them. They can't kill them.
You want to say it without really
Arrest
naming
them.
arrest them.
Yeah. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. I mean, a lot of these cops, most of America is quite safe place. 99% of America is quite safe. You're safe anywhere you go. And the cops in those areas are typically a little fatter, and they don't see much crime, or the only crime is someone's driving too fast. There's no murders or rapes, but mostly in the inner city, not the suburbs, the inner city, in the minority neighborhoods, there's a lot of crime. If you're a cop and you're in that area month after month after month, you kind of learn that, this one's a problem cop. This guy's he's always causing problems. We never can quite catch him, but and these other people are saying it's that guy is always caught. He's stealing things. He's selling drugs, and so the cops, they kind of learn who's the good guys and who are the bad guys. And sometimes when they catch one of these bad, they finally catch this guy. We say red-handed. He's caught selling drugs. Sometimes they just they beat them up. Sometimes they get shot. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it happens. It's the truth. It does happen. It's not fair. It's not right, but it does happen. But it doesn't happen that often. However, the journalism, the TV and the radio, they make it like it happens every day. Well, it doesn't really happen every day. And they never show you, they only show you the video of somebody getting beat up by 5 cops. They don't show you that he stole the car and hurt a bunch of people. And the video also doesn't show this guy's been selling drugs for 10 years and doing all these, stealing money and doing all these things. The video and the journalists never tell you about that stuff. But there are mistakes that are made. There are some young men that they're innocent. They're just innocent. And they get shot and they die. So American democracy is not perfect. I'll never say it's perfect, but it's pretty darn good.
And it's also interesting, how punish this police or not? How punish this police?
His punishment.
But
His question is about punishment of the cops when they really do shoot someone unnecessarily. They normally do get some kind of punishment. But it could be they just lose their job. It could be they, which for a cop is a bad thing. It's like they take your badge. It's a very dishonorable thing. Sometimes they occasionally go to jail, but sometimes they're put on trial if there's enough evidence. And then we have a jury, the jury system. And I think the American jury system works with the American court and jury system because there, in the jury, the trial, you have 5 days or 2 weeks, they see all the evidence, not just a little video, they see all the evidence. And more often than not, even when a cop is taken to jury to trial, they're usually, they say, okay, well, you shot this guy, but there was probable cause or some reason a lot of times, what few times the cops actually go to trial, they're usually found not guilty. Occasionally they go to jail. Okay, not very often.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Question, back of the room. Anybody? Yes.
I would like to ask about the legal gun. There are some states it's legal to carry gun in
I'm sorry, I can't. I've been when I was younger. I went to many rock and roll concerts, and my ears are not so good anymore. Please.
I would like to ask about the legal gun law. What is your attitude about this law? Is it
to own a gun?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Is it better to protect people from someone murder?
Yeah, it's a good question. This will be a very long answer, but it really goes back 250 years to the early times in our country. Everyone owned guns, but they owned guns to go hunting. 200 years ago, every man owned a gun 250 years ago in the U.S. because you were shooting deer, shooting wild hog, for meat for your family. So a gun is seen as a tool. And even today, there are many, many guys that go hunting. It's a hobby. A lot of guys like to play football. A lot of guys like to go hunting. They're shooting birds or deer, sometimes bear, So America has a very long tradition since the first day of owning, even before we were a country, we were owning guns. So it goes back a long, long time with this idea of owning firearms, owning guns. Second, as I told you, in our Constitution, there are very few words that limit anything. You can own as many cars as there's nothing that says about how many cars you can own. It says this much about how many cars, the Constitution. There's nothing in here that says how many boats or houses you can own. There's no limit because there's no limit on your freedom to own a house, a car, or even a gun. And the tradition, the roots of this go back 250, 300 years ago. Every family owned a gun, not so much a pistol, but we say long gun, hunting gun. Every family owned a gun. And they would go hunting in the woods or the mountains for meat for their family. So the tradition has just stayed, it's those roots combined with our idea of very much freedom to live how you want to live is why we still have all these guns around. a lot of people, I get when I teach in Germany, the Germans especially because of the Second World War, and the Germans have a big psychological thing in their brain against guns and weapons because of what they have caused in the Second World War. So I get this question a lot in Germany. They have, well, why can't you put limits on guns now? Our government has tried this idea before. Do you guys know you've studied American history, do you know about prohibition? Something called prohibition. This is the word we use. It was prohibition of alcohol, and it was nationwide. Do you guys know that there was a time period in the U.S. where all alcohol was banned in the entire country? Do you know that? That's the truth. Okay. This was in the early part of the 1900s. For about 30 or 40 years, there was a total national government prohibition against all alcohol. This comes back to guns. And guess what? So the national government passed a law, you can't make alcohol, you can't drink alcohol, you can't have possession of alcohol. Guess what? Many people still made alcohol because they liked it. And they, here's Washington, D.C., they said, forget about you, we're still making, America has a lot of people with German blood, they immigrated. They like beer, they kept on making beer. So a lot of citizens continue to make alcohol at home. And second, the big beneficiary was the mafia. You guys know mafia?
Yeah.
Okay. The mafia is a lot smaller now. It was never big in the U.S., but during the Prohibition years, again, the government banned alcohol. Guess what the mafia thought of the law? The mafia would they imported alcohol illegally. Tens of thousands of gallons of alcohol. They did this for 30 years, and then they make a big profit. So the mafia got rich. The government banned alcohol. The mafia got rich, and all the other citizens made alcohol at home. My point is, the lesson is, just because the government bans something doesn't mean the American citizens will obey the law. We are notorious for not always obeying the law. We're kind of like Azerbaijanis driving on the roadway. Everyone's just not exactly, the law is there to kind of give guidance, but everybody drives kind of crazy anyway. We have a similar attitude towards some of our laws as Azerbaijani does when they drive. So, we have this long history. It's not that so many people, some people love guns, especially men. They collect guns. They buy, I've known some people, they might have 30 or 40 guns. They just like these things. So that's a very big question, but that's your answer. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come here. For me, this is, some people think of this as work. I think of it as fun. I enjoy meeting young people in other countries. I've been all over China, Germany, Japan, doing these kinds of things. I always like to close by saying, in your faces, I see the future leadership of Azerbaijan. I'm going to retire someday. She's going to retire someday. The president's going to retire someday. One of you might be a cabinet minister. One of you might be a famous business leader. Another of you might be an IT pioneer. Maybe one of you ladies becomes the first female president. I don't know. But you guys are the future of your country. Most leaders of most countries come from universities. And most leaders are people that like to learn. The fact that you came here, you're not getting paid, you can be doing something else means you like to learn. So I think every one of you has potential to be a future leader. And to make myself feel good, I believe I'm seeing in some of your faces a future president, a prime minister, a famous business person. I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you.